Pleasant Valley Clinic looked like any other doctor's office. Sunlight streamed through the windows, plants lined the reception desk, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemon. But beneath the surface of this ordinary clinic, something was terribly wrong. Patients weren't getting better. In fact, many were getting sicker, despite faithfully taking the medications prescribed by their trusted doctor. Old Mrs. Gable, who suffered from arthritis, found her pain worsening, making it difficult for her to knit her beloved sweaters. Young Timmy, usually a bundle of energy, became listless and pale, his asthma medication seemingly doing nothing to ease his breathing. Even the clinic staff started to notice the unsettling trend. Nurses whispered in the break room, wondering aloud if a new virus was spreading. Doctors scratched their heads, ordering more tests and adjusting dosages, but nothing seemed to help. A shadow of worry fell over Pleasant Valley Clinic, replacing the usual atmosphere of calm and healing. The community put their trust in this clinic, they had for years, and the doctors and staff had always been trustworthy. The air was getting thick with distrust, and the warm and fuzzy feeling was starting to fade. Something needed to change, and fast. The source of this growing unease was, unknowingly, Dr. Robert Evil. To the outside world, Dr. Evil was a pillar of the community. He had a warm smile, a reassuring voice, and a reputation for being exceptionally dedicated to his patients. He always seemed to have time for a kind word or an extra explanation. He sponsored the local Little League team, attended church every Sunday, and was known for his generous donations to charity. But behind the facade of the caring physician, a darker side lurked. Dr. Evil was drowning in debt, gambling losses, and bad investments having taken their toll. Desperate to maintain his comfortable lifestyle, he had hatched a plan to secretly sell the clinic's medications on the black market. He started small, diverting a few pills here and there. But as his debts mounted, his scheme grew bolder. He replaced genuine medications with placebos or less potent alternatives, pocketing the real drugs and selling them for a hefty profit. He justified his actions by telling himself that he would pay everyone back eventually. It was only a temporary solution, he reasoned. However, the temporary solution quickly spiraled out of control, and the consequences were starting to ripple through Pleasant Valley Clinic. His greed was causing real harm, and it was only a matter of time before his deception was exposed. Into this unsettling environment stepped Sarah, a bright and eager new intern. Fresh out of medical school, Sarah was brimming with idealism and a genuine desire to help people. Pleasant Valley Clinic was her first real job, and she was determined to make a good impression and learn as much as possible. She had always dreamed of working in a small town, and she was excited to start her career here. Unlike the seasoned staff, who had grown accustomed to the clinic's routines, Sarah saw everything with fresh eyes. She noticed the subtle details that others had overlooked, asked questions that others had stopped asking, and challenged assumptions that others had taken for granted. She was naturally curious and very observant. On her first day, Sarah was assigned to shadow Dr. Evil. She was initially impressed by his warm bedside manner and his seemingly genuine concern for his patients. She thought he was a good man who cared for his patients. But as the days went by, she began to notice inconsistencies, small things that didn't quite add up. A nagging feeling began to grow in the back of her mind, a sense that something was amiss. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she knew something wasn't right. This feeling, she couldn't shake. It would change everything for her. The first real clue came with Mrs. Peterson, a sweet elderly woman with diabetes. Sarah noticed that Mrs. Peterson's blood sugar levels were consistently high, despite being on a seemingly appropriate dose of insulin. Dr. Evil simply shrugged it off, increasing the dosage slightly and telling Mrs. Peterson to cut back on sweets. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. Then there was Mr. Johnson, who suffered from chronic pain. He complained that his pain medication wasn't working as well as it used to. Dr. Evil dismissed it as a natural progression of his condition and prescribed a stronger painkiller. Sarah, however, remembered Mr. Johnson mentioning that the pills looked slightly different from his previous prescription. As Sarah continued to shadow Dr. Evil, she noticed a disturbing pattern. Patients on specific medications, particularly those for chronic conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, and pain, weren't improving. In some cases, they were actually getting worse. It was as if the medications were simply not working. This growing sense of dread fueled her determination to uncover the truth. She felt responsible for the well-being of these patients, and she wouldn't rest until she figured out what was happening. She started to formulate a plan to investigate. Sarah knew she needed to be methodical. Jumping to conclusions could damage her credibility and alert Dr. Evil to her suspicions. So, she started by meticulously reviewing patient charts, focusing on those individuals who weren't responding to their medications. She created a spreadsheet, carefully noting each patient's name, diagnosis, prescribed medication, dosage, and reported symptoms. She also started cross-referencing the patient charts with the clinic's medication logs. She wanted to see if there were any discrepancies in the inventory. She compared the amount of medication dispensed to patients with the amount that should have been remaining in the pharmacy. This was tedious work, requiring hours of poring over paperwork, but Sarah was determined to find something, anything, that would explain the disturbing pattern she had observed. She would come in early and stay late, all to solve this problem. She paid close attention to the dates and times of prescriptions, the names of the pharmacists who had filled them, and any notes about refills or changes in dosage. She even started tracking the lot numbers of the medications, hoping to identify a specific batch that might be faulty. Every detail, no matter how small, was carefully recorded and analyzed. She knew that the devil was in the details. She had a hunch that the answer was hiding in plain sight, buried beneath layers of paperwork and routine. She just needed to find it. The breakthrough came late one evening, after Sarah had spent hours poring over the records for Mr. Johnson. She had been double-checking the medication logs against his prescription history when she noticed something odd. The barcode on the bottle of pain medication he had received last week didn't match the medication listed in the system. At first, she thought it was a simple clerical error. Maybe the pharmacist had scanned the wrong barcode when filling the prescription. But something told her to investigate further. She scanned the barcode herself, using a scanner she found in the back office. The scanner displayed a different medication, a much weaker pain reliever that was not appropriate for Mr. Johnson's condition. Sarah felt a jolt of adrenaline. This wasn't just a clerical error, it was something far more sinister. She grabbed several other bottles of medication dispensed to patients who hadn't been improving and scanned their barcodes. To her horror, she discovered that many of them had the same problem. The barcodes didn't match the medications they were supposed to contain. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and the picture that was emerging was deeply disturbing. She realized Dr. Evil's scheme was real, and she was closer to proving it. She had to be careful about her next steps. Armed with this startling discovery, Sarah knew she couldn't keep it to herself. She needed to tell someone she could trust. The next morning, she approached Nurse Davies, a senior nurse who had been at Pleasant Valley Clinic for many years. Nurse Davies was known for her no-nonsense attitude and her dedication to her patients. Sarah hoped she would take her concerns seriously. "Nurse Davies," Sarah began nervously, "I found something strange, and I think it's important." She explained her observations about the patients who weren't improving, and then she presented her evidence about the mismatched barcodes. She showed Nurse Davies the scanned results, pointing out the discrepancies between the labels and the actual medications. Nurse Davies listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When Sarah finished, Nurse Davies sighed. "Sarah, you're new here," she said, "and I appreciate your diligence. But sometimes, things aren't always as they seem. Barcode errors happen. It's probably just a mistake in the pharmacy." She patted Sarah's hand reassuringly. "Don't worry about it. I'll talk to the pharmacist and get it sorted out." Sarah was deflated. She had expected Nurse Davies to be concerned, to recognize the gravity of the situation. Instead, she had been dismissed as an overzealous intern making a mountain out of a molehill. She knew that Nurse Davies wasn't intentionally trying to ignore her, but she didn't realize the depth of the problem. She was going to have to keep digging. Undeterred by Nurse Davies's dismissal, Sarah pressed on. She continued to scan barcodes, meticulously documenting each instance where the label didn't match the medication. She expanded her investigation to include medications prescribed by other doctors at the clinic, but the mismatched barcodes were overwhelmingly concentrated on prescriptions written by Dr. Evil. She created a detailed report, including the patient names, medication names, barcode numbers, and the results of her scans. She organized the data in a clear and concise manner, hoping to make it undeniable that something was seriously wrong. She even took photographs of the mismatched labels, just in case someone tried to dismiss her findings as inaccurate. She wanted her evidence to be airtight. Sarah also started to discreetly observe Dr. Evil more closely. She noticed that he often stayed late after everyone else had left, and she occasionally saw him carrying large bags out to his car. She couldn't be sure, but she suspected that he was using that time to swap the medications and remove the real drugs from the clinic. These observations only strengthened her resolve to expose his scheme. She knew she was taking a risk, but she couldn't stand by and watch as patients were being harmed. She had to do something. To further strengthen her case, Sarah decided to research the medications that were most frequently involved in the barcode discrepancies. She wanted to understand their intended effects and, more importantly, the potential consequences of taking an incorrect dosage or the wrong medication altogether. She spent hours in the medical library and online, studying pharmacology textbooks and research articles. She learned that the patients who were receiving incorrect medications were at risk of serious health complications. For example, diabetic patients who weren't receiving the correct dose of insulin could experience dangerously high blood sugar levels, leading to organ damage and even death. Patients with high blood pressure who weren't receiving their medication could suffer strokes or heart attacks. And patients with chronic pain who were receiving weaker pain relievers were forced to endure unnecessary suffering. The more Sarah learned, the more horrified she became. Dr. Evil's scheme wasn't just about stealing medications, it was about jeopardizing the health and well-being of his patients. He was betraying their trust and putting their lives at risk. This realization fueled her determination to stop him, no matter the cost. She now knew that if she didn't act, someone could die. That thought kept her awake at night. With her newfound knowledge, Sarah revisited the patients she suspected were receiving incorrect medications. She carefully examined their medical records, looking for symptoms that aligned with the known side effects of undermedication or taking the wrong drug. What she found confirmed her worst fears. Mrs. Peterson, the diabetic patient, had been experiencing frequent episodes of extreme thirst and fatigue, classic symptoms of high blood sugar. Mr. Johnson, the chronic pain sufferer, reported increased pain levels and difficulty sleeping, indicating that his pain medication was not providing adequate relief. Another patient, Mrs. Rodriguez, who was prescribed medication for high blood pressure, had complained of persistent headaches and dizziness, symptoms of uncontrolled hypertension. Sarah also noticed that Timmy, the young boy with asthma, had been using his rescue inhaler more frequently, suggesting that his regular asthma medication wasn't effectively managing his condition. The evidence was overwhelming. These patients were exhibiting symptoms consistent with receiving inadequate or incorrect treatment. Dr. Evil's scheme was directly harming them, causing them unnecessary suffering and putting their health at risk. She now had to decide how to present her findings in a way that would be taken seriously, and to whom. She considered going to the authorities, but worried about the time that would take. Time that her patients didn't have. Before taking her findings to someone else, Sarah decided to confront Dr. Evil directly. She knew it was a risk, but she felt she owed it to the patients to give him a chance to explain himself. She also hoped that, perhaps, he would confess and stop his scheme before she had to involve anyone else. She found him in his office, reviewing patient charts. "Dr. Evil," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I need to talk to you about something." He looked up, his expression initially warm and welcoming, but a flicker of unease crossed his face as he sensed the seriousness in her tone. "Of course, Sarah," he said, his voice carefully neutral. What is it? Sarah took a deep breath and laid out her concerns. She explained the mismatched barcodes, the patients who weren't improving, and the symptoms she had observed that suggested they were receiving incorrect medications. She presented her findings calmly and professionally, hoping to appeal to his sense of reason and his oath as a doctor. As she spoke, Dr. Evil's demeanor changed. The warmth in his eyes faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. He became evasive, deflecting her questions and dismissing her concerns as unfounded. He claimed that the barcode errors were simply clerical mistakes and that the patient's symptoms were unrelated to their medications. He subtly tried to intimidate her, reminding her that she was just an intern and that he had years of experience. He brushed her concerns aside. It became clear that he wasn't going to admit anything. Feeling defeated and slightly frightened by Dr. Evil's reaction, Sarah knew she couldn't handle this alone. She needed an ally, someone with experience and credibility who would believe her and help her expose the truth. She thought back to the other doctors at the clinic. Most of them seemed too busy or too complacent to take her seriously. But there was one doctor who stood out, Dr. Kindheart. Dr. Kindheart was an older, experienced physician who had a reputation for being kind, compassionate, and deeply committed to his patients. He was known for his willingness to listen to his patients' concerns and for his unwavering ethical standards. He also had a quiet strength and a sense of integrity that Sarah admired. After wrestling with her doubts and fears, Sarah decided to confide in Dr. Kindheart. She found him in the break room, sipping a cup of coffee. Taking a deep breath, she approached him and said, "Dr. Kindheart, do you have a moment? I need to talk to you about something important." Dr. Kindheart looked up, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Of course, Sarah," he said with a warm smile. "What's on your mind?" Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found someone who would finally listen. She could sense that he was a genuinely good man, and this gave her the courage to proceed. Gathering her courage, Sarah recounted her observations to Dr. Kindheart, starting with the patients who weren't responding to their medications and culminating in the discovery of the mismatched barcodes. She showed him her meticulously compiled report, complete with photographs and scan results. She explained her concerns about Dr. Evil's behavior and his dismissive response to her questions. Dr. Kindheart listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. He didn't interrupt or dismiss her, but instead, asked thoughtful questions, seeking clarification and demonstrating a genuine interest in her findings. Unlike Nurse Davies, he didn't brush off her concerns as a newbie mistake. He took the time to really listen. When Sarah finished, Dr. Kindheart leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "Sarah," he said, "this is very serious. If what you're saying is true, Dr. Evil is putting his patients at grave risk." He paused, considering the implications. "I believe you," he added, his voice firm. "Your evidence is compelling, and I've noticed some similar things myself, although I hadn't connected the dots." Relief washed over Sarah. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone with authority and experience believed her. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. Dr. Kindheart smiled reassuringly. "Now," he said, "we investigate further. But we do it carefully and discreetly. We need to gather more evidence before we can take this to the authorities." He knew they had to be smart. Dr. Kindheart and Sarah agreed that their next step was to focus on the clinic's medication inventory. If Dr. Evil was indeed diverting medications for resale, there should be discrepancies between the amount of medication ordered and the amount actually dispensed to patients. They needed to find concrete proof that medications were missing. They started by comparing the clinic's order records with the dispensing records for the medications that Sarah had identified as being frequently involved in the barcode discrepancies. They carefully tracked the quantities of each medication ordered, the dates of the orders, and the names of the suppliers. Then, they compared this information with the dispensing records, noting the quantities dispensed to patients and the dates of the prescriptions. This was a painstaking process, requiring them to sift through stacks of paperwork and navigate the clinic's outdated computer system. They worked late into the night, poring over records and comparing numbers, determined to uncover the truth. They made sure to do it when no one else was around, so that Dr. Evil wouldn't suspect that they were on to him. The clinic was usually very quiet at night. They worked as a team, each one double-checking the other's work. They knew that if they found something, it would all be worth it. Their hard work paid off. After several nights of relentless investigation, Sarah and Dr. Kindheart discovered a clear pattern of missing medications. The discrepancies were significant and consistent. For the medications that Sarah had identified as being connected to the barcode issues, the amount dispensed to patients was consistently lower than the amount that should have been remaining in the inventory. They found that hundreds of pills were unaccounted for, particularly for medications like insulin, pain relievers, and blood pressure medications. These were the very medications that Dr. Evil was prescribing most frequently and the same medications that were showing up in the barcode discrepancies. It was undeniable proof that something was terribly wrong. The evidence pointed directly to Dr. Evil. The missing medications were the ones he was prescribing, and the patients who weren't improving were the ones receiving those medications. The barcodes on their bottles didn't match, and now they had proof that those medications were simply disappearing from the clinic's inventory. They now had enough evidence to bring this to someone higher up. They both agreed that they should try and find the clinic director. It was time. The scene shifts. We see Dr. Evil late at night in the clinic pharmacy. The lights are dim, casting long shadows across the shelves filled with medications. He glances nervously at the door, ensuring he's alone. He moves quickly and efficiently. He opens a cabinet and pulls out a box of insulin vials. He then reaches for a package of empty vials, identical to the real ones. With practiced ease, he removes the labels from the real insulin vials and carefully affixes them to the empty ones. He then fills the empty vials with a harmless saline solution, creating perfect replicas that will do nothing to help his patients. Next, he grabs bottles of pain medication. He empties the real pills into plastic bags and refills the bottles with over-the-counter pain relievers that are much weaker. He carefully replaces the caps, ensuring that the bottles look untouched. He prints out new barcode labels for the replacement medications using a small printer he has hidden in the pharmacy. These labels will mislead anyone who scans the bottles, making them believe they contain the correct medication. Finally, he places the real medications into a large duffel bag. He zips it shut and carries it out of the pharmacy, his face betraying a mixture of guilt and greed. The flashback ends, returning to Sarah and Dr. Kindheart in the present. This scene is a look into how Dr. Evil performed his crimes. Another scene unfolds, this time in a dimly lit parking garage on the outskirts of town. Dr. Evil arrives in his car, the duffel bag containing the stolen medications in the trunk. He parks in a secluded spot and waits nervously. A black sedan pulls up beside him. A man with a scarred face and a menacing demeanor emerges from the car. This is his contact, a shadowy figure known only as Silas. Silas approaches Dr. Evil cautiously, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "You got the goods?" Silas asks, his voice raspy. Dr. Evil nods, his hands trembling slightly. "Everything's here," he replies, popping the trunk of his car. Silas examines the contents of the duffel bag, his expression impassive. He pulls out a few bottles, checks the labels, and then nods in satisfaction. "Looks good," he says. He hands Dr. Evil a thick envelope filled with cash. Dr. Evil counts the money quickly, his eyes wide with greed. It's a substantial sum, enough to pay off a significant portion of his debts. "Pleasure doing business with you, Doctor," Silas says with a sinister smile. "We'll be in touch." Silas gets back into his car, and the sedan speeds away, disappearing into the night. Dr. Evil clutches the envelope tightly, a sense of relief washing over him. But beneath the surface, a nagging feeling of guilt and unease lingers. He knows he's doing something wrong, but the lure of easy money is too strong to resist. He is now in too deep to turn back. Before approaching the clinic director, Sarah and Dr. Kindheart wanted to make sure their case was as strong as possible. They continued to gather evidence, meticulously documenting every detail. They spoke with the pharmacist, discreetly asking about any unusual medication orders or inventory discrepancies. The pharmacist, initially hesitant, eventually admitted that Dr. Evil had been placing unusually large orders for certain medications and that some bottles seemed to be missing their security seals. They also reviewed Dr. Evil's patient schedules, noting that he often booked appointments back-to-back, leaving little time for thorough examinations. This raised suspicions that he was prioritizing quantity over quality, rushing through appointments to maximize the number of prescriptions he could write. They even tracked down some of Dr. Evil's former patients, who confirmed that they had experienced similar issues with their medications not working properly. With each new piece of evidence, their case against Dr. Evil grew stronger. They had the barcode discrepancies, the missing medications, the pharmacist's testimony, and the patient complaints. They knew they had enough to convince the clinic director to launch a formal investigation. The question was, would the director believe them? They decided to take the chance and present all of the evidence. Sarah and Dr. Kindheart requested a meeting with Mrs. Davison, the clinic administrator. They presented their meticulously compiled evidence, laying out the barcode discrepancies, the missing medications, the pharmacist's testimony, and the patient complaints. Mrs. Davison listened intently, her face growing increasingly pale as she absorbed the gravity of the situation. She had always trusted Dr. Evil, considering him a dedicated and caring physician. The thought that he could be involved in something so unethical and harmful was almost too much to bear. She stared at the evidence in disbelief, her hands trembling slightly. She was so shocked and upset by what she had heard. When Sarah and Dr. Kindheart finished, Mrs. Davison sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then, she took a deep breath and said, This is unbelievable. I need time to process this. Mrs. Davison, Dr. Kindheart said gently, we understand this is a lot to take in, but we believe it's crucial to act quickly. Dr. Evil is putting his patients at risk, and we need to stop him. Mrs. Davison nodded slowly. You're right, she said, her voice firming. I can't ignore this. I'll authorize a formal investigation immediately. I'll contact the authorities and suspend Dr. Evil pending the outcome of the investigation. She knew that it was the right thing to do. The patients were depending on her. News of the impending investigation spread quickly through the clinic. Dr. Evil, sensing that the walls were closing in, panicked. He realized that his scheme was about to unravel and that he could face serious consequences, including the loss of his medical license and even jail time. He knew he had to act fast to cover his tracks. He began by shredding any documents that could incriminate him, including patient charts, prescription records, and inventory logs. He worked feverishly, feeding the documents into a shredder, desperately trying to erase any trace of his wrongdoing. He also started to intimidate staff members who he thought might have suspected something. He confronted the pharmacist, warning him to keep his mouth shut and threatening him with repercussions if he spoke to the authorities. He even approached Nurse Davies, trying to convince her that Sarah was a troublemaker who was making false accusations. His behavior became increasingly erratic and desperate. He knew that time was running out and that he had to do everything he could to protect himself, even if it meant resorting to unethical and illegal tactics. He was getting desperate and he was making mistakes. He knew he needed to stop Sarah. Sarah and Dr. Kindheart knew they had to act quickly. They suspected that Dr. Evil would try to destroy any remaining evidence before the authorities could arrive. They decided to work together to secure the most crucial documents and medications, hoping to preserve them for the investigation. They raced to the pharmacy, hoping to find the original medication orders and inventory logs before Dr. Evil could destroy them. They carefully gathered the documents, making sure to document the date and time they were collected. They also searched for any remaining bottles of medication that might have mismatched barcodes, hoping to add them to their evidence. As they were gathering the evidence, they heard the sound of the shredder whirring in Dr. Evil's office. They knew they were running out of time. They quickly collected the remaining documents and medications and hurried out of the clinic, hoping to avoid a confrontation with Dr. Evil. They knew that he wouldn't hesitate to do anything to protect himself, even if it meant resorting to violence. They had to be careful. Their adrenaline was pumping. As Sarah and Dr. Kindheart hurried down the hallway, they heard a door slam open behind them. They turned to see Dr. Evil striding towards them, his face contorted with rage. He blocked their path, his eyes fixed on Sarah. "You," he shouted, his voice trembling with anger. "You think you can ruin me? You have no idea what you're doing." Sarah stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm doing what's right, Dr. Evil," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You're hurting your patients, and I won't let you get away with it. You little—" Dr. Evil lunged towards her, grabbing her arm tightly. "You're going to regret this," he hissed, his grip tightening. He was trying to intimidate her into silence. Dr. Kindheart stepped forward, placing himself between Dr. Evil and Sarah. "Let her go, Robert," he said, his voice firm. "This has gone far enough." Dr. Evil glared at Dr. Kindheart, his face flushed with anger. "Stay out of this, Kindheart," he snarled. "This is between me and her." He wasn't going to let anyone stand in his way. He knew that if Sarah spoke up, his life was over. He was ready to do whatever it took to silence her. The situation was very tense. Dr. Kindheart pushed Dr. Evil away from Sarah, creating some distance between them. "I won't let you hurt her, Robert," he said, his voice rising. "This isn't the way to solve this." Seeing that Dr. Evil was becoming increasingly agitated, Dr. Kindheart knew he needed to get help. He quickly reached for his cell phone and dialed the clinic's security number. "Security, we need assistance in the hallway outside Dr. Evil's office," he said urgently. "We have a situation that's escalating quickly." Dr. Evil realized what Dr. Kindheart was doing. He lunged towards him, trying to grab the phone, but Dr. Kindheart sidestepped him, keeping the phone out of his reach. "You can't stop me," Dr. Evil shouted, his face red with fury. "I've worked too hard for this." Just then, 2 security guards arrived, alerted by Dr. Kindheart's call. They quickly assessed the situation and moved to restrain Dr. Evil. "Dr. Evil, please calm down," one of the guards said. "We need you to cooperate." Dr. Evil struggled against the guards, but they were too strong for him. They managed to handcuff him and escort him out of the clinic, bringing an end to the dramatic confrontation. Sarah and Dr. Kindheart were relieved that it was finally over. But they knew that the fight was far from won. Shortly after the security guards escorted Dr. Evil out of the building, the police arrived. They had been alerted by Mrs. Davison, who had provided them with a summary of Sarah and Dr. Kindheart's findings. The police officers took Dr. Evil into custody and began to search his office. Inside, they found a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf. Inside the compartment, they discovered a large stash of stolen medications, including insulin, pain relievers, and blood pressure medications. The medications were packaged in unmarked bags and bottles, ready to be sold on the black market. The police also found a small printer and a stack of blank barcode labels, confirming that Dr. Evil had been printing his own labels to cover up his scheme. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Evil was clearly guilty of stealing medications and endangering his patients. As Dr. Evil was led away in handcuffs, he looked at Sarah and Dr. Kindheart, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and despair. He knew that his life was over, and he had no one to blame but himself. He had let his greed consume him, and now he was paying the price. The police took him away. He was going to jail. The next day, Mrs. Davison called a meeting of all the patients who had been under Dr. Evil's care. She stood before them, her face etched with sadness and sincerity. She explained the situation, carefully detailing Dr. Evil's scheme and the steps that had been taken to uncover it. She apologized for the harm that Dr. Evil had caused and assured them that the clinic was doing everything it could to rectify the situation. She explained that the clinic would be contacting each patient individually to review their medications and ensure that they were receiving the correct treatment. She also announced that the clinic was offering free medical consultations and counseling services to any patients who had been affected by Dr. Evil's actions. She wanted to make sure that everyone had the support they needed to cope with the betrayal and the potential health consequences. The patients were shocked and dismayed by the news. Many of them had trusted Dr. Evil implicitly and were devastated to learn that he had been deceiving them for so long. But they were also grateful to Mrs. Davison for her honesty and her commitment to putting their health and well-being first. They knew that the clinic would do everything it could to make things right. The community would have to heal. In the aftermath of Dr. Evil's arrest, Sarah was hailed as a hero. Mrs. Davison publicly praised her diligence, quick thinking, and unwavering commitment to her patients. She was recognized for her keen eye and her determination. The other doctors and nurses, including Nurse Davies, who had initially dismissed her concerns, apologized for not taking her seriously sooner. They now understood the importance of listening to even the newest members of the team. Sarah's actions had not only exposed Dr. Evil's scheme but had also saved countless patients from harm. She had proven herself to be a valuable asset to the clinic and a true advocate for her patients. She had gone above and beyond what was expected of her. As a result, Sarah quickly earned the respect and admiration of her colleagues. She was no longer seen as just an intern but as a trusted and respected member of the team. She was invited to participate in important decision-making processes, and her opinions were highly valued. She was now a mentor to other interns. Sarah had finally found her place at Pleasant Valley Clinic, and she was determined to make a difference in the lives of her patients. She had become a role model. With Dr. Evil gone and the correct medications restored, the patients at Pleasant Valley Clinic began to recover. Mrs. Peterson's blood sugar levels stabilized, and she was able to resume her knitting, her hands moving nimbly as she created colorful sweaters for her grandchildren. Mr. Johnson's pain subsided, allowing him to sleep soundly through the night and enjoy his daily walks in the park. Mrs. Rodriguez's headaches and dizziness disappeared, and she was able to return to her active lifestyle, gardening and volunteering at the local library. Timmy's asthma came under control, and he was once again able to run and play with his friends without struggling to breathe. The atmosphere at Pleasant Valley Clinic was transformed. The shadow of worry and distrust that had hung over Pleasant Valley Clinic was lifted, replaced by an atmosphere of hope and healing. The patients trusted their doctors again, and the staff worked together as a team, committed to providing the best possible care. Sarah's story serves as a reminder of the importance of patient advocacy. It shows that even a single person, armed with courage and determination, can make a difference in the lives of others. It also underscores the crucial role of ethical medical practice. Doctors have a responsibility to put their patients' well-being above all else, and to act with integrity and honesty. The events at Pleasant Valley Clinic taught everyone a valuable lesson about the importance of speaking up when something doesn't seem right. It showed that even though it can be hard to challenge authority, or to go against the status quo, it's always the right thing to do when it comes to protecting the health and safety of others. And so, Pleasant Valley Clinic moved forward, forever changed by the events that had transpired. But it emerged stronger and more committed than ever to its mission of providing compassionate and ethical care to its patients. Sarah's legacy would live on, inspiring future generations of healthcare professionals to always put their patients first. It is vital to always do the right thing.